Hi everyone. Now that we have learned how to factorize quadratic expression, in today's video we want to learn how to solve quadratic equation. So before that, let us recap what is the difference between expression and equation. For expression, there's no equal sign here. That means the x here can take any value. So let's say x can be -3, 0, 1, 5 or any other number. Whereas for equation, when we say we want to solve an equation, we want to find what is the value of x here that will satisfy this equation. So the answer for this is x equals to 2. There can only be one value that will satisfy this equation. Before we move on, I would just like to highlight that there are actually three methods in solving quadratic equation, and we are going to look at the first method, which is using factorization. And in this video, I'm not going to emphasize on how to factorize because we have already covered that. So let's look at this first example. To solve this equation, first we need to factorize it. So after factorizing it, we have two brackets here, and let's look at this in detail. This means there are two brackets multiplied to each other, and you will get 0 at the end. And how do we get 0? Let's try and look at this in a simpler form. A times b equals to 0. So be reminded, any number multiplied by 0 is 0. So there are two cases. One is when a is 0, 0 times b is 0. The other case is when b is 0. So let's apply to this question here. When one of this bracket is equals to 0, we will get the answer. So we equate it. X minus 1 equals to 0 and x plus 3 equals to 0, and x equals to 1 and x equals to -3. We can substitute this back into this equation, and at the end we should get 0 at the end. So let's check. When x is 1, after substituting, it is 0, and when x is -3, after substituting it, it is 0 also. Now let's look at another example here. This is another case whereby we have to carry out one round of factorization of just the number. You can see 2, 8, and 90. They are multiples of 2. So the first step, we factorize 2, and now we can see this is something that is easier to factorize. So the following steps are the same. Factorize it, equate the brackets to 0, and then we'll get two values of x, and that's the answer. Now I'm going to go through two more special cases. For example 3, the third term is missing here. Notice usually there are three terms. The third term, which is a number, is missing. So in this case, it's pretty simple. We have already done this type of factorization, which is to factorize x, and now it's the same. These two, although this is not a bracket, is the same. As long this is 0, you get 0 at the end. So we say x is 0 and x minus 10 is 0. So at the end, x can be 0 or x is 10. And for the last example, the second term is missing. Notice the middle term, x, is missing. So for this example, there are two ways of doing it. In my previous video, I've covered this is one of the special case for expansion. For method 1 is solving it like normal. We bring the 36 to the other side, and then square root 36, we always get two numbers here. Because -6 squared, we get 36, or 6 squared is also 36. That's one method. The second method is using factorization. Remember this form of factorization? And if we factorize in this form, we will still get two answers, -6 and 6. So in conclusion, solving quadratic equation using factorization, we have to first factorize it. Second, we equate it to 0 and we will get the answer. And that's all for today's lesson.